Hello and welcome to the YPO Leader of Leaders podcast brought to you by the YPO Leadership Development Network. I am Diana Daniels and I'm a very proud member of the YPO Greater Europe, working in telecommunications, blockchain, and digital inclusion. Here in this podcast, we are going to dive into the stories, strategies, and ideas that are shaping the future of leadership. And today, we're talking about building teams that are going to stick around and thrive. And for that is joining me, Kerry Siggins. Kerry, she's a member of the YPO Pikes Peak Integrated Chapter. And she is also the CEO of StoneAge, an employee-owned manufacturing and technology company that's been recognized as a top workplace to work by the Outside magazine, the Inc. magazine. Kerry's leadership also has been transformative, earning her titles like the EY Entrepreneur of the Year and the Colorado CEO of the Year. She actually recently published her book, The Ownership Mindset, a handbook for transforming your life and leadership. Kerry, you're more than welcome to the podcast. We are super thrilled to have you with us.
I'm so excited to be here, Diana. Thank you for having me.
And to dive into the conversation, I would love to start with your story. StoneAge is an employee-owned company. And what we just said is that under your leadership, it's become this shining example of how ownership can transform a business. What inspired you to implement an employee ownership model? And what I would love to know is, what was that driving reason behind the decision? Did you see any immediate changes in your team or the culture? Talk us a little bit about it.
Sure. So I came to StoneAge 18 years ago, and I did not start the company. I took over for the founders at the ripe old age of 28 when I had no idea what I was doing. And they had an employee ownership scheme, so to speak. They allowed employees to invest in the company. So every year at the end of the year, we would do a backwards looking valuation and offer the employees a 25% discount to buy stock in the company. And so that had been going on long before I came to StoneAge. And it was a great benefit, but you had to put your own money in the company. So some people were very comfortable with that and some people were not. And so over the next, 8 or so years, I could see how powerful it was. And our founders were getting older, now in their mid 60s, and we needed to actually start buying them out. Our employees were just buying new shares. This was not a way for them to transition out of the company. It was a way for them to create this ownership feeling within the organization and allow employees to invest in the company. So when I approached him saying, we have to actually have a model that's going to be sustainable, because if something happens to the two of you, who owns this company? A machinist who's been buying stock for the last, 15 years, who loves owning the company, but doesn't want to own the company. And so we, at that time, decided to do what is called an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan. And the reason why we went with that is because we wanted broad ownership. We had about 70 employee shareholders at the time. This was back in 2014. And that was a little under half of our employees. And so not everybody participated. And an ESOP is a U.S. employee ownership scheme that allows for all employees to own shares in the company. It is managed like a retirement account, although we don't talk about it that way. And so that was what the transition was like. So that's what we did. And it was a heavy lift and a really important lift. And it has dramatically changed the company.
Interesting. I was actually reading an article by this association, the National Center of Employee Ownership. Actually, it's called the NCO.
I'm on the board of the NCO.
Well,
yes.
So in the latest report, they tell us that when your employees own part of your company, the growth and the faster they go faster in growing than if you think about like your competition. And I wonder, right, when is the right time for a company to embrace this type of model? Is during the growing phase or when you're, like in your case, you're restructuring the thing? How do you think that leaders can recognize when their business is ready for this kind of transformation?
So I think any stage of a business, you can think about how do you incentivize your employees with ownership. And lots of companies do. Lots of companies offer stock options, for example, but they don't talk about it as ownership. They talk about it as compensation. And that's a big mistake, because what you need for people to do is to feel like they're part of something bigger. And that's what ownership is. When you're talking about compensation, that's very self-focused. This is what I'm getting paid. And so I think that any organization can think about the ownership mindset and how do they use actual ownership opportunities to incentivize, to create that type of ownership culture. But in terms of like what StoneAge did, you have to be a pretty mature company to do what we did. I think people should start small. You can start with profit sharing. You can start with stock options. That's what I advise all of the boards that I sit on who want to start to cultivate that ownership mindset within their organization. And then as companies are looking to be able to grow, or founders are looking to transition out of the company, employee ownership is a great way to a great option to consider at that point.
It's very interesting because I was actually watching this Sam Altman interview about this topic. And one of the key arguments is that startups don't give employees enough equity in relation to their contribution, especially when it's compared obviously to founders. And I guess that many of us, when we hear about employee ownership, we think about that, like stock options, or when we join other companies, they gave us stock options. In this case, what do you think that startups or smaller companies could learn from the approach that you have?
Yeah. So I think startups don't have much of a choice. I mean, here's the tough thing about setting up these types of programs, and it depends on where you live in the world and what your tax liabilities are. But if you give stock away, there's a tax implication that happens almost anywhere. And so you really have to take into consideration how you set up these plans so that way you're not creating a big tax liability for your employee that they maybe can't afford. And so that's why stock options are so useful, or are so good, is because it's not going to be a taxable event for an employee. So you really have to take that into consideration. Now, like what we did in ESOP, it's basically a trust that owns the company. And so the company bought shares from the selling shareholders, our founders, and some of the other 70 shareholders. We're 100% ESOP now. So we have no other shareholders besides everybody in the ESOP. And then the company sold that to the ESOP trust. And so that the employees get it as part of their compensation. And they get actual stock, but because it sits in this trust, it's a non-taxable event. It's taxable when they leave the company. They can roll it into an IRA, and then when they start to take it as retirement distributions, or they can pay a bigger tax penalty and take the cash now. That's up to them. So that's the tough part about this, is you really do have to understand what you're doing from a tax perspective so that you don't create taxable events for your employees.
So, and then if we bring back into the culture aspect, culture is such a big part of this, and the success that you have actually created in your company. You're building the most admired culture at StoneAge. And how does employee ownership directly impact the culture? What are that ripple effects on innovation, growth, when the employees start thinking like owners?
Yeah. So my favorite compliment that I get is when a customer comes to visit us at our headquarters in Colorado, and they say to me afterwards, "I've never seen people so happy. They are so proud of their jobs, and they love telling us how they get product out the door to make our lives easier. Can I get a job here?" And so I think that that right there is what you're trying to create, is this feeling that even your customers can feel. And that is what happens when you have employees who think and act like owners. And they show up because they own the company. It matters to them to solve those tough problems, to make sure that we're getting product out the door to our customers and giving really great service because it affects their bottom line. They care more. Now, a lot of employee-owned companies, though, don't necessarily take the time like StoneAge has to really cultivate this ownership mindset. You have to be very intentional about what you do, how you teach people how to think and act like owners, because let's face it, most people have no idea. They just show up for a paycheck. But if you want people to be more than a paycheck player, you have to teach them. And so we teach them how to be a great teammate. We teach them what self-leadership is. We give them the skills that they need to be able to deliver on the promises that we're making for our customers. And it sparks creativity, innovation, teamwork, and we're incredibly profitable because our employees know how to do more with less.
I love this, and I believe that every strategy comes with its challenges. And when we are implementing all of the strategies that we want to achieve to success, for sure we have missteps, and in this past, what I would love maybe that you can share with us is what have you learned about overcoming those challenges to make the process more effective and impactful? What do you think are those big potential missteps that leaders should avoid?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, you need to have a simple set of values that you live and breathe. And this is just not words on a wall. This has to be the real core things that you do as an organization. So we have 3 values at StoneAge. Practice self-leadership, how you show up for yourself, right? How you give feedback, how you own your attitude, your effort, how you lead yourself. 2, be a great teammate. So how does that affect how are you showing up and how does that affect the team? Are you humble enough to put the team first? Do you say that's not my job when your teammates need your help? And then the 3rd aspect is delivering on the StoneAge Assurance Promise, which is our promise to our customers. It's really clear: self, team, customers, the bigger purpose for why we're there. And then we have built everything around it. And I'll tell you a big mistake that I made in the beginning. It wasn't a mistake, but it was a really good piece of feedback that I got. So before we had created these really clear values and built training around it, built our performance review system around it, built our culture around it, I let a toxic high performer go. So one of those employees who's really good at their jobs, but is just a jerk to work with. And when I was firing him, I said, I'm letting you go because you're not a great teammate. And he said, where in my job description does it say be a great teammate? And he was right. He was doing all of the tactical aspects of his job really well, but we didn't have this, like how you show up, right? The enjoying the reason why people enjoy coming to work is because it's a great culture where people enjoy working with each other. And that was one of the best pieces of feedback that I got, that I realized that we had to be really clear about this and we had to weave it into all of our systems if people were going to understand that it's not just the job that you do, but it's how you do it and how you make people feel while you're doing it.
Yeah, it's not only about performance, but it's also about how do you develop it. I love this. And I love that we're arriving to this segment of the podcast where we get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
It's about I'm going to shoot a couple of questions to you. I want you to say whatever comes to your mind.
Okay.
And we're going to have a mix of different questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. Okay. What is that one quality that every leader must have?
Self-awareness. If you do not know how you impact others, then you're not going to be a leader worth following. You have to understand yourself and how you impact others.
That's very, very true. And what's one action leaders can take today to embrace that ownership mindset?
Take responsibility for everything that happens in your life. Things do not happen to you, they happen because of you. Even if you are truly a victim of circumstance, take COVID, for example, right? None of us saw that coming. You still have to decide how you're going to show up. So just take responsibility for everything. It is the most empowering thing you can do for yourself. You can change your life, you can change your situation, you can change your company when you take responsibility.
I love this because we're talking a lot about intention and showing up. And if let's say that we can travel in time, and then you can give to yourself a piece of advice, maybe I don't know, 10 or 20 years ago, what would you tell her?
I think don't be so hard on yourself. I was brutally hard on myself, and it caused so many issues in my life. Self-esteem issues, body image issues, substance abuse issues, because I just talked so poorly to myself. And I decided years ago, I had a very traumatic event in my life back in 2006. And that's when I decided that I was going to adopt this idea that I'm responsible for everything that happens in my life. I'm also responsible for how I talk to myself. And the way I was talking to myself was not getting me what I wanted. And so I wouldn't be so hard on myself.
Yeah, sometimes we just don't realize how hard we are with ourselves. And so I love this. Let's keep going. All right. What is the most rewarding part of living on an employee-owned company?
Oh my gosh. Watching people grow, watching people embrace the own it mindset and change their lives. I believe that companies are in existence to help our employees live their dreams, whether it's a small dream or a big dream, whether that dream means, leaving the company and going and starting a business, or, taking a month off to go travel the world. And so I love it when I see that people are thriving in our organization and really living up to their full potential. And they actually have the means to go live their dreams, to go knock something off their dreams list. And so that's the most rewarding thing for me is seeing my employees love living their lives.
So we spoke about like the best advice you will give to yourself when you were younger. And what about the actual advice? What is the best advice that you have ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. Two things. One, I was another YPOer, and I was talking to him about my journey. This was probably, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And he said, Kerry, you got to lose the chip on your shoulder. And it wasn't like this negative chip, but it was part of this, putting myself down and looking at my past as a way that was holding me back. And he said, lose the chip. It's not doing you any favors. And it kind of stung when he told me that. But it was so true. And so I really appreciated that because I didn't ever look at it that way, that I have this chip on my shoulder. And so I decided that then and there I was going to stop, that it was actually maybe being a little bit of a victim, even though I hadn't looked at it that way. And then the second piece of advice that I got is that money isn't everything and freedom is really the key. This came from one of my board members. And I was talking to him years ago about potentially leaving StoneAge to go take a different CEO role. And he said to me, you're crazy. You're crazy. That might pay you more money, but the freedom that you have with this company, it's effectively your company. Do not undervalue the price of freedom. And it would have been a huge mistake to leave the company back then. And I was so glad that he gave me that advice, and he was spot on.
And then if we see the in between the lines, what in one word, what does ownership mean to you?
Power. It gives you, that. Yeah. When you own it, you give yourself power, and ownership. It gives you the power to create the life that you want. So that's the word I would utilize.
Super insightful. I agree with you. So thinking about more on what do you think is the biggest myth about employee ownership?
That individual contributors, blue collar workers aren't savvy enough to be owners. And that is simply not true. Every single one of my employees is an owner. And that's from me as the president and CEO of the company to, people who are working in our machine shop in the field, people who would not necessarily think like, oh, those guys would be savvy owners. The own it mindset came from our machine shop. And that is so freaking cool that
It is.
they were looking for a way to inspire the machinist to take better care of their stuff, to put things away in the right places and to really care about quality. And they came up with the ownership mindset and has evolved over time, but they really embodied this idea of we're owners in this company. And their innovation and creativity sparked something amazing within our company. Anybody can be owners. Anybody can be taught how to think and act like an owner. Don't think that it's just for executives, managers, those employees that the blue collar workers absolutely can own it. So that's a big myth I think that people have.
Yeah. I love this. Then two more questions for you. One is like the one habit that you believe has been critical to your success.
Self-care.
Important.
So important. If you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of others. You have to prioritize taking care of yourself. So exercising, eating well, mental health, meditating, take care of yourself. There is time. And if you don't have the time now, your time on this planet is going to be shorter than what you want or more painful than what you want. So take care of yourself.
The last question I have for you, Kerry, is what is your vision that you have for the future of employee ownership in business?
So my personal goal is to create 1,000 millionaires through employee ownership. So we are well on our way. And as we grow the company and continue to create more employee owners, we have the opportunity to help them generate real, meaningful wealth. And so 1,000 millionaires through employee ownership. That's my goal.
I love this. This is super inspiring, and you're nailing it. I guess that your insights have been so powerful. And I know that our listeners are going to love every bit of this. 3 takeaways that I'm taking with me is that ownership is not just about the stock options. It's more about creating that culture where employees feel empowered and accountable, and also that they're investing in the company's success. That's my takeaway number 1. My takeaway number 2 is that it's about the mindset. Yes. Building the mindset that can build and create that loyalty, the innovation, the long-term growth that requires also leaders that kind of about the common missteps about the communication, like not intentionally saying what you want from them. I guess this is another one that I have. And then the third one, I love this about talk to yourself nicely. Lose that chip also. And I really want to take it home with me, because we don't realize how important it is that we talk to ourselves in a nicer way. So before we close this segment, I would love to hear from you, maybe one final piece of advice that you think that you can leave to our audience today.
Yeah, I think that culture creation is really hard. And getting people to think and act like owners is something that people say that they want, but it gets overwhelming to figure out how to do it. And just take one small step at a time. And that's how you change your culture. And you start with trust. It starts with relationships. It starts with trust. You're never going to lay the foundation of ownership thinking if you don't trust yourself, if you don't trust your employees, and if you're not trustworthy as a leader. So start with trust and focus on that, building that within your organization. That's the foundation for building an ownership culture, and just take one step out of a time. It is absolutely worth it. You will transform your organization when you have employees who really, truly do think and act like owners.
I love this. Thank you. Thank you so much again, Kerry, for sharing your wisdom, your stories, your strategies with us today. Yeah. Your work on ownership and team building is truly super inspiring. And I know our listeners will take this a lot from this conversation. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here.
And to our audience, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the Leaders of Leaders podcast. We are in most of the platforms that you have available. share this episode with a fellow leader or maybe a team builder. Then let's continue this conversation about how we can build teams that can stay and produce better outcomes. I am Diana Daniels. I'll see you next time on the YPO Leaders of Leader podcast. See you soon.